All right, so hello everyone. I'm Grant Schaller and a second year student here at Tuck. And on behalf of the Tuck Food and Ag Club and Tuck Center for Private Equity and Venture Capital, I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining this panel on indoor agriculture. We have three fantastic panelists here today. We have John Purcell, who's the CEO and president at Unfolds, Michael Ingemann, who's the chairman of the board at Nordic Harvest, and Dana Worth, who's the SVP of commercial at Plenty. And I'd like to start by just having each of the panelists give a brief introduction of themselves and their firms. So let's start with you, John, if you don't mind kicking it off.
No worries, Grant. Thank you so much. And thanks to you and the organizers for inviting me to the panel and to the conference here at Tuck. I am president and CEO of Unfold Bio. About myself personally, I've been in agriculture over 30 years now. Been on a lot of farms, worked on a lot of crops, been in farms in over 40 countries. Also have a stake in a family ranching operation in Montana, so it's not just professional, it's also personal for me when it comes to food and ag. In the last 12 years, I've been in the produce end of food and agriculture. Most recently, before moving into Unfold, I was head of vegetable R&D for Bayer Crop Science. So Unfold is a new venture. We've been around since last summer. We were started with a very generous initial funding, $30 million by Leaps by Bayer and Temasek. We're very thankful to the great support we've had from those two companies. And we also have certain rights to the Bayer vegetable seed germplasm specifically for the vertical farming sector. So that's what we're about. We're 100% focused on really providing seeds and digital solutions for vertical farms. We do think the genetics end of the business is underserved, frankly. I think we've got some amazing farms out there, including the two gentlemen I'm sharing the panel with, but I do think that we really need the attention to bring genetic solutions and digital solutions specifically for the vertical farming sector. For us, we're going to focus on 5 crops initially: lettuce, spinach, tomato, pepper, and cucumber, and really look forward to this conversation and just having a great discussion around where vertical farming is and where it's headed.
Thank you, John. Michael, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Grant. So Michael Ingemann, I'm Danish. I live in London. I'm actually a Tuck graduate from back in '92. Seems like a former life, but I went from Tuck into consulting with a McKinsey company back in Scandinavia, and moved to London later on in 2001, working with a software company just in time for everything to close down at that time, and went then back into consulting. But I've also been working with food for a while. I've been on the board of sort of the founder of the new Nordic food movement in Denmark, and the restaurant Noma, which was the top restaurant in the world for a while. So that sucked me into the world of food, and I got involved with the vertical farming project of Nordic Harvest, where I'm now a chairman and a partner, about 5 years ago when we started to get that off the ground. And Nordic Harvest, we just recently completed the construction of phase 1 of our facilities in Copenhagen, and we are the biggest and the first sort of industrial scale vertical farming in Scandinavia, and we can produce around 800 kilograms per day, and we hope to get that up to about 3 tons a day within the next year or two. And we're so new that we started delivering our first products just a couple of weeks ago. So we don't have a whole lot of track record, but I can only say that the consumers love it so far, and have taken the products from this strange production method to their hearts.
Thanks, Michael. Let's go to you, Dana.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. It's nice to be here. Thanks to the Tuck community and the organizers. Good to be back. So my name is Dana Worth, and I'm the SVP of Commercial at Plenty, which means that I oversee all our commercial functions, which at this point are quite nascent, because Plenty, as you may know, while it's been around for about 8 years, has been primarily focused on R&D and engineering for most of those years. So we've got a great team of about 350 people, the vast majority of whom are scientists and engineers who've been working on building what will be, when we open it up in Compton, the largest output vertical farm in the world. So if you've seen videos of our farms, they actually look a little bit different. We grow on towers as opposed to stacked trays, and that has all sorts of benefits to the final output and to the way the farm operates. We are building a farm down in Compton in Los Angeles, that will be quite exciting. I was just telling John before this that it's currently in the middle of construction, but is looking good, and we're really excited to have that open. We do have a farm in South San Francisco, which is where I'm located, that has been producing a small amount of product that we've been using to just kind of test the market here in the Bay Area. So if you've been to a Safeway or Whole Foods in the Bay Area, you may have seen us so far. Prior to this, I worked for almost 6 years at Impossible Foods, where I was one of the first employees on the business side there. Kind of very similar situation where the scientists and engineers had been underway for almost half a decade before I joined. And I led the commercialization of our initial product there, the Impossible Burger, first in Momofuku in New York. I'm very envious of your relationship with Noma, Mikael. But first with Momofuku in New York, and then eventually all the way on up to Burger King and Starbucks, where you can find the Impossible Burger and the Impossible Sausage today. So really excited to be here.
Great, thanks, Dana. And I would actually like to go straight to you, Dana, and help set the context for this conversation. So can you tell us a little bit about where we are in the history of indoor agriculture? Obviously, greenhouse growing has existed in some form for quite some time. And then some of the vertical farming that we're seeing, like what you're doing at Plenty, is certainly a more obvious visual change. So what are the qualities or technologies that are really distinguishing this current time in the indoor ag space?
Yeah, I think we're at the intersection of three really interesting trends that make this a little bit different than what we've seen in the past. So the first is on the demand side. I think we've all seen the numbers about the amount of food we're going to need to grow. So I think it's about 3x more food than we grow today to feed the growing population. It would be great for those, the humans who live on this planet, if a lot more of that was fruits and vegetables, right, than what it is today. The second is we're seeing supply disruptions in a way that we haven't seen in the past, right? I live out here in California, and for any of us who went through the last fire season, it was a pretty remarkable and unprecedented situation, and really brought home the effects of climate in a very personal way for many of us. And the other is, along the supply disruption lines, is the continuing destruction of farmland, right? About 3 acres, according to American Farmland Institute, about 3 acres a minute of farmland is turned over to development right now. So you've got these convergence of growing demand, increasing and uncertain supply disruption, or increasing disruption to supply, and also uncertainty around supply. And then, technology that didn't exist 10 years ago, right? The things that we're doing today in our farm and what we're putting into Compton, is cutting edge, right? Lighting and air handling and automation and sensing, which is going to be really interesting. And by the way, we're already working on the next version of it beyond Compton, right? That's the fun thing about these technology cycles, is by the time you've actually got the thing stood up, you've already got a whole bunch of good ideas for what you can do in the future. So, I think it's a maybe an extension of trends that have been around for a while, but rapidly accelerating and really exciting. I think you're seeing it. I know we're going to talk about funding in a bit, but I think you're seeing it in the kind of massive amount of investor and consumer interest in the space.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Dana. And Michael and John, feel free to chip in at any point. I'll try to just kick us off on different topics. But Michael, I actually want to go to you next and ask you a little bit about how technology has changed for sort of traditional outdoor farming, just as it has for indoor farming, around greater analytics and automation capabilities. I think we've seen those trends in both sides of production. And so I was wondering if or can speak to the tech overlap between indoor and outdoor farming, and in what ways it might differ at this point.
Yeah, I must give a bit of caveat. I'm not a farmer, and I'm certainly not a technologist either. But I have seen quite a few companies, startups that come in with various technologies in accelerator programs and for VCs for traditional farming. And it's a lot of it is about controlling or trying to control what are sort of uncontrollable factors. The weather, of course, which is a big factor, but also the different soil composition in different parts of the field even. And I think that the biggest difference here is that, as I can see it, is that for vertical farming, you're actually putting a lot of all these uncontrollable factors under control. So you're keeping them constant. So it's more a question about really getting the most out of the production that you can get in a controlled environment. So I think that the overlap, I haven't seen that much of an overlap, but I do see a lot of the potential collaboration with maybe growing, and this may be something that John knows more about, but starting out crops in vertical farms and moving them on to real land, or to really get the synergies going between the two production forms. But I think that when I talk to farmers also, I mean, they seem to be very interested in these new technologies simply because it takes away so many of the uncontrollable factors that farmers battle every day, but also, of course, makes great terroir products what they are. So we should also make sure that we don't forget that you can create something in real soil that you probably will have difficulty replicating in the vertical farms.
Yeah, I agree. It's just think about the overlap, and it's really there is at the heart of it this confluence of technologies. I often refer to it as Silicon Valley meets Salinas Valley, which is really this digital age in agriculture. And Mikhail's right. Obviously, in vertical, and as even high-tech glass, you're able to control more of the environmental parameters. So it's about controlling a lot of the environment. But even in open field, greenhouse, net house, whatever, the ability to measure what's happening environmentally, the ability to use sensors and probes, and then the ability to use digital means to basically manage your crop, it cuts across all of that. And that digital age in agriculture goes well beyond vertical. It starts at from open field all the way through the entire technology ladder. Everybody has moved into the digital age when it comes to how you manage your crop, how you do it. The ability to control the environmental parameters are different from where you're on that technology ladder, but the desire and the technology to really monitor, assess, and then use management tools to optimize production. Like I say, it's the digital age meeting the biological age, basically.
Yeah, that's great. And obviously, John, so this space of indoor ag has seen a ton of attention and investment over, I think, a lot of those benefits that you just spoke to. So with all of this attention and kind of the hype building around it, where do you see it has surpassed expectations, and where has it maybe fallen short?
I think where the sector is doing well is certainly, use the word hype. There's a lot of awareness. Let's put it that way. A lot of awareness about the potential. A lot of awareness of where the impact vertical can have. I think also the great things it's done. It's actually gotten product out the door, into stores, into consumers' hands, so they can see the quality, they can understand in a very tangible way what vertical farming delivers, not just what you see on a website. I think another thing it's done quite well is actually the geographical footprint. And we've had conversations, with over 25 different vertical farms, literally in every region of the world. So I think the geographical footprint is there, whether it be US, Europe, Middle East, Asia, et cetera. There are interest and there's investments, and there are vertical farms who are producing crop around the world. And I don't know if falling short is the right way to frame it. I would just say the industry hasn't matured yet in certain areas. Dana was talking about their new operation. Scale is huge, and this is a big industry, the produce industry. And let's be honest, vertical is not huge at this point, right? You think about the total amount of produce that's out there, it's still a small sector as far as that. So scale has to increase. And then I think that we have to do work on the diversity of crops. It's dominated by leafies and microgreens, herbs, et cetera, which are great way to start. But I think for it to really grow to the potential that I think a lot of investors and a lot of people feel it has, you have to make the leap to fruiting crops. And Plenty is one of the few companies that are doing that. But I do think there's a reason why the high-tech glasshouse growers focus on mostly tomato, pepper, cucumber. Highly differentiatable, high value, consumer awareness around those crops. And I do think for vertical to really reach its full potential, you have to make the leap to fruiting crops, which is one of the reasons why we're in existence. Frankly, we want to try to provide the kind of seed that would be of utility for vertical farms.
I would just add on to John's comments. John, I think you're referring to our publicly announced partnership with Driscoll's around strawberries, which is super exciting. And I would add in all of these crops, whichever one you're growing, demonstrating that we can deliver a superior product to consumers as well, right? That this isn't just about something that the consumer, frankly, may or may not care about, which is like how their food gets on their plate, but actually creating products that have a discernible benefit to consumers, whether that's better flavor, more consistency, cleaner, whatever it may be. I think that there's a ton of upside there, and you're going to see a lot more of that coming online as more and more folks bring more production online.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's right. And one of the things that we're trying to do here in Scandinavia is creating a brand in a category that has been completely unbranded forever, and getting the consistency, the quality, the backstory, the narrative right. I think that is something that we will be able to do, and hopefully is also part of the future for vertical farming, because you're also getting another kind of, at least here in Northern Europe, a different type of players into this field who are thinking differently about it, and we think that is also what the investors are looking for. It's not just the sort of the price point or the cost point, but also the ability to go in and create categories or branded categories that didn't exist before.
Yeah, and actually, we had a question pop up from the audience, sort of speaks to, I think, a little bit of what you were talking about, Dana. So I guess, right now the main point of differentiation is that indoor farming is this, more tasty, more consistent product is what it's creating. As the market sort of matures and production scales, do you anticipate an appetite for certifications in indoor farming as like a point of differentiation, or do you think that indoor farming will continue to be a point of differentiator or a point of differentiation for some time?
Yeah, certifications are fine, I think, but I think really the thing you have to deliver, consumers aren't primarily looking for certifications. At least not most consumers are not primarily looking for certifications. They're looking for something that's delicious at a good price point, right? That they in a brand, as Mika was saying, helps them identify that, right? If you can build those attributes into your brand, sure, there's some certifications, especially for very specific people with specific dietary or religious needs, right? That makes sense, right? Whether it's kosher or halal or whatever. But beyond that, I don't think there's a huge amount of value. I think it's a secondary or tertiary kind of consumer want.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'd love to go back to kind of the business profitability and how investors might think about that. Obviously, the indoor ag space has seen a good amount of investment, and so I'm wondering what investors might be seeing in kind of like the business model that appeals. Is it in terms of creating healthy margins? Does it come more from value generation through product differentiation, or is it through cost reduction around automation and sort of the cost reductions around the farming process itself? And maybe Dana, if you wouldn't mind continuing on this one.
I think the answer to that is yes, and I think that investors see, I think what a lot of us see. I'm a relative newcomer to the food and ag industry, only 7 or 8 years here compared to the other panelists, but I love the industry because there aren't that many industries on the planet where every single human being interacts with what you do every day, right? Not just every day, but usually multiple times a day. And then there's another 2 billion people on the planet who are producers into that system. I can't think of another system that has that kind of global coverage and global impact, not to mention, obviously, the impact on climate and the humans and the animals that live on the planet. So every conversation I've had with an investor, whether it was at Impossible or here, the ones who are interested see that, right? They see the opportunity both for change, but also as capitalists see the opportunity to make big bets with potentially enormous payoffs. I mean, we never get hung up on the the total addressable market slide, the TAM slide, as investors call it. That's never a problem when you're talking about food and ag. So I think that I think the sector is still massively underinvested in, even despite all the investment we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years. Given the scale of the system and the scale of the potential solutions that are available here in the intersection with climate and human health and these other just macro challenges that we see. So if you couldn't tell, I'm very bullish on the sector, and I think that there's much more room to go there. To your second question about the economics of operating, absolutely. If we want to appeal, we do not get the job done from a mission standpoint if all we do is put super expensive, high-end lettuces and berries into the market, right? Or in my prior employer, super high-end veggie burgers into the market. That's not the goal, at least for any organization I've ever been involved with. I won't speak for everyone, but that's not the goal for any organization I've ever been involved with, because most of us are mission driven, right? We want to do this to create change on a massive scale across the planet, and that requires bringing costs down and bringing price points down over time.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah, I wonder, John, if you would be willing to continue this conversation and thinking about the timeline or a little bit about, I guess, expansion of indoor farming into maybe some more commodity products. Do you see that happening, or do you see the product continuing along some of the more premium vegetables? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think short term, there's going to be a focus on those segments of the veg sector that really are differentiatable at the consumer level, that have a little higher price. And not to be super premium necessarily, but certainly, if you think about being competitive with organic or hyper local, other kinds of sectors that are out there, and also on a crop basis. There's a reason why glasshouse growers, for the most part, focused on, as I said earlier, tomato, pepper, and cucumber. Some eggplant in there as well. But because you have to, in order with the capital costs you have, there's certain expectations. But also, let's be honest ourselves. There's a certain price point you have to hit, and for certain crops, that price point has more flexibility than it does with other crops. And so I think when you have a crop that you can differentiate, and where the sensory characteristics are really premium and the quality characteristics are really expected to be at a high level, that's why growers on the higher technology ladder focus on the crops they do. Because let's be honest, whenever you're paying for light and energy versus using the sun, right? There's going to be a differential in the equation. Has the technology advanced? Absolutely. But I don't necessarily it has to be super premium. But I do think certainly, just like the rest of the vegetable sector, there's a reason why certain crops are more amenable to indoor agriculture or to greenhouse glasshouse production versus open field. And I don't think that's going to change. I think the price points are different. I think the expectation at the consumer level is different, and so I don't think that's a bad place to be, frankly.
I think that just to add to that, I think that here in Europe, at least in Northern Europe, Scandinavia, and in UK, we have a very high proportion of organic produce in the stores, and so people are already used to having a category of within the food and veg category that is more expensive simply through its production methods. So I think that and often I must say, you can't really taste whether it's organic or not. But it is something that you trust, and you trust its impact on the environment and you as a consumer. And what we try to do is also to put into the same context here and really see this as organic 2.0. This is going beyond what it was with those who developed the whole organic category. And actually we don't really see this as part of this. For us, this is not as Dana said, it's not about getting a tiny bit of product to a few select consumers who have the money to buy this. It is about creating a more democratic supply of high quality produce to a lot of people, and we think we can do that.
I'm going to go back to something Mikhail said earlier, because I think it's interesting on what does the branding even look like? I mean, is there actually some type of branding at the consumer level that would focus around the fact it was produced in a vertical farm or complete controlled environment agriculture? Or does it become, just part of higher quality produce that may be fed by many different streams, whether it be greenhouse, glasshouse, or vertical, et cetera? And I think the produce industry, I mean, this is a monster industry, right? It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. They're gonna have a lot of impact on how this evolves and what that means at the consumer level, as far as what is the awareness, and I think it was I think Dana said earlier, consumers ask a lot of questions now about where it's coming from, who grew it, how it was grown, et cetera. Vertical has a great opportunity from a traceability and really from creating that history of where the food came from at the consumer level. But whether that manifests itself as a brand around vertical, or whether it just flows into the kind of high quality produce that's available year round, I don't know how that's going to play out. And I think the produce sector, it's going to see how it plays out depending upon scale, crops, et cetera.
Yeah, that's great. I'd like to move into a little bit about how vertical or indoor farming broadly can be moved into areas where year-round production maybe isn't possible. It's also seen as more sustainable and highly productive, but I think this interest in potentially food security and being able to place it in areas where there might be risk to food security is interesting. So, Mikkel, can you speak a little bit to how that might develop? Like where are the issues of food security most pronounced, and what do you think the geographic concentration of indoor production might look like over the long term?
But I think that in most major cities, I think that it would fit well, of course. And I think that in a place like Denmark, that has sort of a very, very short growing season and very high cost to heat any kind of greenhouses, it also makes a lot of sense to do this year round. I mean, I think that what also has changed is the energy sources, because right now we will produce completely with renewable energy from wind, and a few years ago that wouldn't have been the case. That we would have been sort of burning gas or something else to grow the crops. And I think that right now it is much more sustainable than it was before. I think that we're producing the same crops. I think that most others start out with in vertical farming. It's the salads and the herbs, and for somebody to not get their rucola for a few weeks because they couldn't get it from somewhere, it's probably not going to sort of make the big difference in the big scheme of things. But I think that once we get beyond that and we start really to as we talked about just before, to move more crops into vertical farms and really make it not just a fringe producer, but a more sustainable part of the major part of the production system, then it's definitely going to change the food security, and also with the lack of handling and the lack of washing and so on, we take out a lot of the contamination sources that otherwise will make a lot of people worried or ill. Maybe not in our parts of the world, but in the less developed countries. And we see that a lot of interest in the Middle East and in Far East for vertical farms, for doing some sort of collaboration, either because of the contamination risk that people just do not trust their suppliers, or simply because we can go in there and produce in a consistent way year round.
Yeah, and then I just sort of reflect on something Mikkel said and add to that. I think the Middle East is a great example. Singapore is another great example where you have countries with significant capital assets. They also have sophisticated industries and major multinational. They have very good awareness from electronics and other industries like that. But arable land is tough. It's either the desert in the Middle East or in Singapore. There's just not much arable land. So for countries like that, looking at vertical, it's huge, because they see it as I know you guys had some sessions on aquaculture too. For Singapore, aquaculture and vertical are a big piece of their food policy. They have a stated country goal of Right now, less than 10% of the food that's consumed there is produced there. And so they want to get that to 30% by 2030. So there's a lot of programs within Singapore to kind of incentivize vertical farms. So they see that as a viable way to increase their domestic food production. I think Mikhail's right. The Middle East is another great example. A lot of capital, people invested. And that's why you're seeing some of these deals being struck with vertical farms from either Europe or the US, building farms in the Middle East, to address some of the food security or domestic food production issues.
Yeah, and I guess along the same lines of this flexibility in where you put production and being able to supply locally, what are the savings in the supply chain look like, or what points in the supply chain can be skipped? And Mikhail, let's go to you again to kick this one off, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean I think the whole production right around the corner from where consumers will buy it is, of course, taking out a lot of trucks from the roads. And we see that here in Europe that it is primarily produced in Spain and in Southern Europe, or whatever is being consumed in Northern Europe in the winter months. So of course that will take out a lot of that need. But I think that also it might be more in the sense of I think as we talked about before also. Who said that? But it will induce people to eat more greens, simply, and that will change the composition, we hope, of people's diets, and that of course also will have an impact on the supply chain and the whole food system. We can see that here that it just tastes better, right? It just tastes better, and the shelf life will be longer, and it'll be much easier to go in there and cook with greens, and that will have an impact on the planet and also the need for other kind of products going into the food system.
I want to build on the point that Mikhail just mentioned. I think it's really important about actually getting people to shift their diets, right? That's one of the major ways that this industry can have an impact. And whether it's the mechanism is flavor or the mechanism is shelf life extension, there's a bunch of things that hold consumers back today from eating really what are the, if you look at the, recommended global daily intakes of fruit and vegetables, we fall far short of where we should be. And the way that I think about this is, imagine if we could add just 1 year of life, of productive life, to every single person on the planet. That's 7 billion additional productive years to the planet. Think about the hugs and kisses that would be had, the innovation that could be pursued, the things we could do as a species by just shifting people's diets. And to me, that's one of the big macro goals of, like, why do I get up in the morning? Why do I do this? As I said before, there's no other industry that touches every single human being on the planet every day. And we know that there's major deficits in the way that people eat today. And we're not going to legislate those into change, right? We have to, as business people, create that change by offering consumers the things they care about to get them to make the change.
Yeah, I appreciate that outlook. And with that in mind, we've spoken about expectations for the industry and some of the tailwinds behind it. So I'd like to ask John to maybe kick this one off. Where do we go from here? And what does indoor ag look like in 5, 10, or 20 years?
Yeah, I think number one, I think you're going to see a lot more volume. I think you're going to see a lot more produce flowing out of indoor farms. I think when you think about the resonance it has at the consumer level, the ability to differentiate the crop, the production systems are amazing that are being built. So I do think the first thing is you're just going to see more of it, just more volume. I do think we're going to make the leap toward diversifying crops. It's a great start where people started with the crops that are currently being grown, but I do feel we got to get to a more diverse crop set to really provide the fuller fruit and vegetable experience that are there. And I do think the geographical diversity is going to continue. And I think it's not just going to be major cities. You're going to see mid-sized cities. You're going to see a lot, because people, no matter where you live, having a local solution, having food that's grown near where you live, it's attractive. So I think you're going to see a geographical diversity as well as crop diversity. And like I say, the big one, I think you'll see a lot more volume coming out of this as the technologies improve, as the crop diversify. And it's going to be a bigger part of the whole fruit and veg product portfolio across the industry.
That's great. I think we can take a stab at some of the audience questions that we've had pile up in the meantime. This first one is a little bit scientific for me, so apologies in advance if I don't communicate this clearly. But can you comment on the opportunity to modify, whether through GMOs or breeding, and create new phenotypes of crops that are far more tailored to vertical or indoor growing operations, so potentially more edible mass per kilowatt hours required to produce? What does that look like? And I think, John, you probably might have a perspective to kick this one off.
I spent 30 years trying to do that. So yeah, I probably do have perspective. Yeah, I know, great question. I do think vertical provides a unique opportunity. And when you think about developing new varieties, there's an equation we all use, G by E by M, which is basically the genotyping versus the environment versus management. The advantage you have when you control the E part, when you control that environment through your M, through your management, then you can really focus your genetics on quality, on the attributes that are most valuable for the sector, for the vertical farming sector. So when you're not outdoors, and you're eliminating, frankly, a lot of the pest and pathogen pressure, then you can say, okay, there's still some diseases you have to worry about, but for the most part, it's much less severe than you have outdoors. And that's a lot of what you spend your time on when you're producing crops for open field, frankly, is protecting against the environment. When you're controlling that environment, it really allows you to hone in on your genetics. And I think all tools are available. You got to work on, you want to have the quality that you expect at the consumer level, and there's lots of great work going on there. But I do think you're going to be looking at certain types of plant architecture, certain plant habits. We certainly rapid cycle time, so you're getting crop being produced quickly, and you can optimize that because you have control of your environment. So I think it's a really great problem to have from a breeding standpoint. Some ways it's similar because you're eliminating some of the environmental pressures, but now you can focus on those crops, whether it be the agronomic traits that are most amenable to an indoor harvest, to an indoor production and mechanical harvest, all those kinds of things, and then really focus on the quality attributes as well. As far as GMOs, GMOs are not a big player in fruits and vegetables right now. There's just a couple crops out there, so I don't see them necessarily playing a big role because there's a lot of from a consumer level, there's a lot of challenges there, plus regulatory, et cetera. When you think about smaller acre crops versus the big row crops, where GMOs are obviously a major contributor and a great asset for farmers in those crops. But I do think the other tools of modern biology, whether it be gene editing, whether it be any kind of the predictive breeding approaches, all the things that we and other companies are doing, all that's going to be in play. And I think they'll definitely play a valuable role in bringing the kind of genetics that'll work agronomically on the farm, but also from a quality perspective at the consumer level.
Yeah, that's great. The next question that we have in here is, do you see a world in which row crops are grown in the context of vertical farming? If so, what are the major technological hurdles the industry must overcome? And I know we sort of adjacently touched on this a little bit. I think the other thing I would add is maybe, what do you see as the long-term split between indoor and outdoor production? And maybe Dana, if you want to take a stab at this one.
Sure, I can give a little bit of a viewpoint, although I'm definitely the newest to the industry. I would put it in the context of the overall trends that I started with, which is the increasing climate pressure, right, is just going to create the need for change. And while the existing setups are not amenable to row crops, I think we're going to find ourselves increasingly in a situation, right, where we have more extreme weather, right, reduction in arable land, all the facts I started talking about at the beginning that are going to put us in a position where we're forced to find alternatives to the existing system.
Yeah, I just will say I do caution, because you hear talk of this sometimes, but let's be honest. If you're thinking about literally just in the U.S., hundreds of millions of acres of corn, soybean, wheat, cotton, et cetera, it ain't going vertical anytime soon. I mean, come on, why would you? Why wouldn't you use natural sunlight to do it? Albeit there are incredible pressures on producers now because of climate and other conditions that are out there. But the seed companies and the technology providers are working to help address that, and the farmers are doing a great job. It's just that's a tall order to think about some of those large acre row crops ever going into vertical, unless there's a real Armageddon kind of scenario that forces it. But for the most part, growers are responding. There's huge challenges for them, but I just don't see that anytime soon, to be frank with you.
Yeah, thanks.
Sorry, I've been in ag a long time. That just blows my mind when people start talking about
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the current technology is certainly not. I guess I might be more on the real Armageddon side of things than other folks. Like, I think we're going to see severe changes to the planet's climate in the next 20 years that have material impacts on the way that we grow food.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Number one challenge facing us today: the food and agriculture.
So our next question up, which I think is an interesting one, maybe Mikkel, if you want to take a stab at this one. So with so much automation, are there opportunities for job creation for agricultural workers who will be displaced? So like maybe there's a shift in some different kind of roles, but how do you see, I guess, the labor needs changing with this move into greater indoor production and automation?
Really interesting question, and I think it's something that goes way beyond vertical farming and into many of the things that are happening sort of technologically right now. You can say that farming in most places has already been industrialized, and you see the number of people working in farms compared with before is sort of down to 1 or 2% of what it was 100 years ago. So I see that a lot of the people working in agricultural production, at least that I know of, are already working with quite sophisticated machinery and quite sophisticated technology. And I can easily see those people moving into vertical farming, because there's still a lot of stuff, at least where that I've seen, where you need people who know what they're doing and who can operate either the monitoring or the harvesting or the other equipment that's required. But I think that a lot of people were who work the fields. I don't see them, of course, in the vertical farms as part of the future. And then again, it will create other types of roles. That Dana talked about the number of technologists working just before he got on board. So I think that there's going to be a whole lot of new people coming into to work with food and food production who would otherwise have gone into something else in the past, working with chemicals maybe, or with pharmaceuticals or whatever. So I think we are at the cusp of a new era in food production that will create a lot of interesting jobs and interesting professions, but it might not be the same as those who work the field today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mikkel. And thank you all. We're nearly out of time, but I would open it up for any closing thoughts the three of you might have, and appreciate all of your contributions so far.
Yeah, thank you, Grant, for having us all today. I think it's, as we talked about at the beginning, we're just at a really exciting convergence of trends that have been building for years, but we're seeing, as is demonstrated by the capital influx and also the talent influx, as Mikkel was just talking about, people focusing on these problems now who might have gone into other industries before. I think that's really exciting, and I'll stand by my claim that the industry is still massively underinvested in, and there's lots more to come.
I agree. And we're talking business school here, and we remember that when I went to business school, we talked about S-curves in many, many different ways. And we're still at the horizontal part of the S-curve, the early part. I mean, we're still very, very much in the early days. And there's so much new stuff coming into this whole sector in terms of technology and opportunities that I think that I mean, when we meet again 10 years from now, we won't be able to recognize the industry that we have then.
Totally agree. From a technology perspective, as we talked about, that confluence of technology between the digital, the robotics, automation, with the genetics, the biology, it's an amazing time to be in this. I think vertical is right at the epicenter of it, which is really, really cool. And I just think we're going to see advances that none of us here can imagine sitting here today. And I just think the future is going to be incredible for indoor agriculture.
Well, thank you so much, Dana, John, Mikkel. Really appreciate you joining us for this conversation. To the audience, I would encourage you all to stick around. Our next panel that's about to start up is on corporate VC in agriculture. So please stick around for that conversation and some later in the day. And yeah, thanks again for joining us, and we'll be watching your companies to see what's next.
Great.
Thanks, Grant.
All right,
Thanks.
bye.
Bye.